Everyone you know is either on a GLP-1 drug or they're asking about one. And now there's a Crohn-specific trial data coming out of the 2026 Congress. So let's talk about what it actually says, because the answer is more interesting and more complicated than the headlines suggest. Hi, I'm Kate, and today we're talking about GLP-1 drugs and Crohn's disease, and it matters right now because patients are walking into their GI appointments already half convinced that these medications belong in their treatment plan, and they deserve a clearer picture before that conversation happens. So I remember specifically the moment a Crohn's client first mentioned ozempic to me in clinic. They'd read that it reduces inflammation. And wasn't that the goal of Crohn's disease? We need to reduce our inflammation. So they assumed it was going to be of benefit to them. So reducing inflammation, mucosal healing, is a little bit different than, it helps reduce inflammation. It's anti-inflammatory. That does not apply to the same context if you're suffering from Crohn's disease. So the gap between a headline that says GLP-1 reduces inflammation and what a Crohn's flare actually feels like is quite significant. So here's the same middle path. GLP-1 receptor antagonists, drugs like semaglutide, do appear to have genuine anti-inflammatory activity that researchers are now studying in IBD populations specifically, and that is worth taking seriously. But anti-inflammatory activity observed in a trial is not the same sentence as this drug manages Crohn's disease. A 2025 meta-analysis published in Elementary Pharmacology and Therapeutics found signals of reduced systemic inflammatory markers in IBD-adjacent populations, while simultaneously noting that mucosal healing data, which is the gold standard in Crohn's disease, remains sparse and definitely inconsistent. The science is real, but it's early, which means the honest answer is watch this space carefully, not act on it impulsively. So what are GLP-1s? What do they actually do? So GLP-1 receptors in the gut lining, the basic mechanism is incretin hormones. So why researchers think this pathway might matter for intestinal inflammation beyond just reducing blood sugar? Because the GLP-1 receptors sitting in the intestinal mucosa, that location matters for IBD research. The anti-inflammatory signals being studied are to do with the inflammatory pathways TNF-alpha, IL-6, NF-κB signaling, where preclinical and early clinical data has shown activity and what activity means versus clinical benefit. So it's showing activity that will demonstrate reduced inflammation, but it doesn't actually mean there's a clinical benefit to that. So who the data applies to and who it doesn't. So patient profiles in the existing trials, predominantly Crohn's patients with comorbid obesity or metabolic syndrome, it's important for those people. And why extrapolating to lean Crohn's patients or those with stricturing is a really big leap. It doesn't mean it applies to all cohorts in that Crohn's disease. It's being specifically studied with those with other comorbidities. So why the data does not yet answer? It doesn't answer long-term mucosal healing data. No head-to-head with biologics. Unknown interaction profile with immunosuppressants. And the GI side effect overlap with active Crohn's symptoms. So nausea and delayed gastric emptying is a GLP-1 side effect. So what could that look like with someone that already has Crohn's gut symptoms? So if you are interested, you can bring this up with your GI because that's not a problem. You are allowed to ask questions, and it's better to have a really genuinely informed conversation about whether any of this research is relevant to your specific disease phenotype and current treatment plan. The difference between asking, should I try Ozempic versus does my inflammatory profile match the trial cohort? That changes the whole conversation. And it's worth asking that question, does my inflammatory profile match the trial cohort rather than should I try Ozempic? So, when a new treatment option appears, people get pretty excited, and that's understandable. But it's important to balance hope with caution because don't rush into anything that hasn't necessarily got the research or the data behind it. A headline is simply that, it's a headline. So, the realistic, hopeful picture is this research thread is genuinely interesting. The mechanisms are plausible, and the right response is engaged patience. Stay close to your GI team as the data matures and continue asking the questions. So, supportive care alongside what your medical team decides. That's the layer that's important. So if you found this useful, share it with someone in the Crohn's community who's been asking about GLP-1s because good information travels. I'll see you in the next video and have a beautiful day.